Well, like, so back in the day I would spend maybe half an hour, maybe once a month, just having a wee skim through the plethora of Twitter accounts, mainly Twitter accounts, and if any related news articles to the individuals in question appeared anywhere on Google or whatever, I would have a wee skim through them as well. People, of course, I'm talking about is the anti-racists. You know, I would highly recommend, for people that live in Scotland anyway, I don't really necessarily know the names of any that, you know, are prevalent in England per se, but there's quite a few in Scotland that I know the names of. And, you know, you just go through the Twitters or you go through the organisations' Twitters, etc., and time after time you will always come across stuff that either irritates you or somewhat unnerves you, purely because there was a period of time where these individuals, these organisations were just classified as somewhat fringe. But long gone are those days. We're now in a period of time, we've moved into a period of time where they're relatively mainstream now, and their bogus narratives, their bogus ways that they justify or showcase that so-called racism is prevalent and exists everywhere across society. You know, the microaggressions are rife, floating around, all around. Can't see them though. You know, their BS has now become a mainstream talking point, and it's got to the point where education is now being influenced on the back of it. So these so-called anti-racist experts / academics are now implementing policy, governmental policy, and educational resources. But then I came across this is just a brief example here. I genuinely thought it was a joke. First and foremost, I thought I should have seen this before from a few years ago, but just even the guys tweeting him, this has got to be a joke, but they're all retweeting it. Chief Superintendent Farouk Hussein. I mean, it sounds like a fucking meme. But anyhow, he says that we're determined to create a diverse and inclusive police service. And this evening we're hosting an event for a potential BME candidates, or just BME candidates in this regard. There's still time to register, right? I mean, why? Why do we need to diversify our police force? And of course, the proverbial namby-pamby rhetoric, you know, an inclusive police force. Wow, that sounds so cute, so brave, so bold. But yeah, it says Police Scotland is acutely aware that the diversity of our communities is increasing all the time. Oh, it's increasing all the time. So, you know, again, the fluffy words, diverse, etc., etc. Yeah, let's take a step back and look at that for what that really means. What they're saying there is that as time progresses, as time goes on, Scotland, these communities that they're referring to, these communities that were once upon a time Scottish, are becoming less and less recognisable. They're becoming more brown. They're becoming more black. Therefore, we need to shoehorn in black and brown police officers purely because the communities that these people reside in happen to be of the same ilk. Oh, I see. You know, so it says as well, we recognise the importance of our communities being able to relate to our police officers. Also, are you trying to suggest that they can't relate to white police officers? Oh, but the whites that still reside in that community, despite the fact they're probably dwindling in numbers, they have to put up with the fact that all the police officers around them, or an ever-increasing amount of them, will not look like them. They just have to put up and shut up. You know? I'm sick of this shit. I really am. The way that they talk about this crap, that it's apparently there's an imperative importance that they have to see themselves and they have to be able to relate to the police officers. Shouldn't fucking matter, should it not? We're always taught to be colourblind. We're all one, the human race. And we therefore actively are reaching out to BME communities and encouraging you to consider a career in policing. Throughout the event, attendees will learn about the recruitment process, the training, the role of a police officer, and the endless opportunities which are available to you once you embark on this exciting career path. Yeah, fuck off. I come across stuff like this all the time. This is a common theme with these people. It's a very strange community that they've got in one of the far corners of Twitter. Relatively unnerving, purely for the fact that, as I say, a lot of them are all patting each other in the back for progress that's been made in regards to infiltrating our academia with their fucking nonsense. But so they have this, you know, building racial literacy, Education Scotland, Scottish Government, and she's from the anti-racist educator, if I'm not mistaken. Brilliant conversations took place today at our webinar. Participants got a chance to practice racial dialogue and navigate their contexts. Exciting anti-racist action ideas coming together and more collaboration to lead anti-racist change. Ah yes, anti-racist change. You people come to our country and you proclaim that everything is racist. You redefine racist. You know, excellent news. You would say that, wouldn't you? But, you know, she retweeted this as well. Looking forward to our next training and critical engagement session. We will be undertaking critical conversations and reflection and learning to unlearn with Together SAR, the Scottish Alliance for Children's Rights. Learning to unlearn, of course, you know, and emphasis on critical, because it's critical race theory. That's what this shit is completely doused in. The whole thing, a large part of their whole, you know, ideology that they all profess and espouse is critical race theory. You know, this isn't just an American problem anymore. This isn't just an American college campus problem anymore. This is now officially a Scottish fucking problem. And as I said, these people are no longer fringe. They are now beginning to influence our academic policy, our academic resources, etc. We've already got fucking anti-racist educational resources in the pipeline. Some have already been introduced. And who's responsible for that? Individuals such as this. There's another one here, St Albert's Primary School in Glasgow.
And making their own. Here's our arts correspondent, Pauline McLean.
Oh, shit. There's lack of diversity in children's books. You know, God forbid that the books in a country that was predominantly white, historically was always predominantly white until, I don't know, maybe the last 10 or 20 years, if we're talking in the context of Glasgow, and all of a sudden they're complaining about the books being white. Yeah, fuck me. But Rowena Ashrad, she's another one to keep an eye on, of course, though. She was the one that was always complaining about a lack of diversity in the teaching workforce in Scotland. You know, so, they're just fucking arseholes, really. That's all they are. Miserable arseholes. With a total gripe, a grudge, a chip on their shoulder that I don't think will ever be lifted. But Dublin as well is now getting involved with this bullshit. You know, nowhere's safe. Nowhere is safe. You know. Racial harassment is commonplace. Recommendations from Kajita Mohammed, internalized racism, diverse voices. You know, you got what we got here. Toolkits, of course. Oh, they're never far. They never go far without their toolkits. And we got Kajita Mohammed's big bad Kajita Mohammed. I've made a few videos on it in the past. It's been a while, Kajita. Been a while, but it's just wow. Together against racism. No comment. No comment, man. I'll be here all day. What? Where is this? Not Kajita, sorry. Rowena Ashrad. Yeah. You'll often see intermittent retweets of organisations or websites with more educational resources or rhetoric that's similar to educational resources that we've all seen before, such as this one, for example. Ideas for global citizenship. You know? And there's a review from Teach the Future Scotland, a youth campaigner from said group. A youth campaigner, of course, you know. And then they go on to say that the resource is very well put together, but the importance of education being inclusive and recognising intersectionality, and this will be pivotal, and it's something I, as a recent high school leaver, would have benefited from massively, especially in late primary school. It will help young people become more aware of the world around them in their own community and globally, with climate change not something which will wait around to be learned about. So introducing it in the curriculum at an early stage will be life-changing for many. A huge positive of this resource is the awareness of equal anxiety. Very important to take care of young people's mental health when learning about the climate, non-existent man-made crisis, of course. But you know, intersectionality, that's the key term to take away from that shit, because naturally that means the BAMEs are more disadvantaged, and so are the women. Everybody is going to have a very difficult time getting on with life when the non-existent man-made climate change reaches fever pitch and the world starts burning to a cinder. But it's fine, because if we're all taught about it from a very young age, we'll know how to adapt or change our behaviour, and everything will be fine. Just to summarise this, but this was another Twitter account I came across. Are you getting behind black colleagues, speaking out and standing up for them and supporting BAMEs and their communities, etc.? No, I'm no as it goes. Yeah. It's not easy to face the responsibility of power and privilege. You know, that's the new modernised definition of racism, remember? Power plus privilege. Yeah, so it's not what my dictionary says, but what do I know? What do I fucking know?
In the mirror and say, have I done everything that I possibly could to be fair, to be equitable? Is my workforce that I manage reflecting the community that I serve? And just now, of course, it isn't. We need to make teaching, we need to make schools, working in our schools and nurseries, attractive to that very diverse range of community that we have across the city. And I'm delighted that now we're starting. We're starting with Black Lives Matter behind us. We're starting with our young people behind us, and we are going to change. Thank you for your part in all this.
The world. This last week, I've been thinking about this Black Lives Matter thing. And the horror show that was the murder of George Floyd. Now, this is tricky for us in Dribbly, because we're not the most diverse community. But, you know, I don't think it matters where you're from. I think it matters that you do something about it. Because Jesus would, wouldn't he? And, listen, I'm aware that...
This is from what's it called, sorry? Equalities Education Services Glasgow. What the fuck, like? So this came from that Twitter account I was just on. I mean, straight away we're being told about the need to require, the requirement for teachers, more being teachers, and nurseries and schools in general to be more appealing to the BAMEs, you know. Because obviously what they mean by that is currently, I think, as things stand, it's just too white for them right now, and they don't like that. They don't see themselves. That's a common theme. It really is one of the most common themes that they run with. But I'm not going to listen to this boot, I don't know who she is, but nonetheless. What the fuck is that?
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Let's stand up against racism.
Black lives matter because they haven't mattered for 300 years. It's got to change now, and this is just the start.
The Black Lives Matter movement existed long before summer 2020. But after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, there was a groundswell in awareness of the movement and its aims.
I mean, there was a resurgence in a movement that was based purely on manipulated or deaths at the hands of police. Fucking hell. It was the movement itself, from my understanding of it, was initially created on the back of blacks dying at the hands of police, but they proclaimed was due to racism, etc., etc., when the reality was very different, you know, such as some individuals reaching for guns, refusing to comply, etc., etc., etc. But these people chose to run with a little narrative that, they were shot dead because they're black. And it was the same thing with George Floyd. But anyway, I'll let her speak for herself. I have no idea what they're going to say.
In the world. Scotland was no exception, and for many young black and minority ethnic people in Scotland, this became the turning point for them to take action on the issues of racism and racial inequality facing them in their school lives.
Racial inequality. Oh, this will be good. You mean the disparities? Oh, of course. You mean disparities. What else would it be? Lack of leadership roles, etc. But, just bear in mind that I don't know if this is a recap and they're going to talk about things in the current day, or at least 2021 context when the video was uploaded, but just the fact of the matter is that this is just another example, and I mean, they're not the only one. There was thousands of different examples, including our very own government. Everybody jump on the George Floyd gravy train to push for their social justice escapades. And it was pathetic. It's fucking pathetic. It was pathetic then, and it's even more so now. But nonetheless, there we go. Black kids in Scotland were, they're discriminated against, and there's inequality, etc. Why? Oh, because we're black, of course. Don't provide any actual evidence. Don't provide anything that can be taken seriously. That's usual bullshit, is it not?
Young people are calling for schools to decolonise and diversify the curriculum.
How convenient that they're calling for the very same thing the SNP decided to go ahead and do anyway. Yeah, it's almost as if it was a match made in heaven.
More diversity in the teaching workforce.
Oh, I'm sure the black children and the black teenagers are calling for more black teachers. I wonder why that is. One has never ceased to amaze me how they get away with so much shit that we could never dream of.
And for better approaches to tackling racist bullying. Whether through speaking out on social media, organising petitions, or forming their own anti-racist groups, young people are now asserting their right to an equally rewarding experience in education. Because as much as our schools might aspire to be inclusive, for too many young people, this is not the reality. The Black Lives Matter movement is necessary, because individuals and institutions often behave as if they don't. Here in Glasgow, Scotland's most diverse city, we have the opportunity to turn things around by taking leadership on race equality in our schools.
To create change, we need to understand the root causes and foundations of the thing that we're trying to change. In this video, we'll look at some key concepts around race and racism that you can use to take this work forward in your schools. In particular, we're going to look at racism as a structure that impacts all of our lives.
Oh, God, shock, yet again. You know, every single time I make a video on feminism or on anti-racism, I always now expect to see one of two things. Redefining of words, or referring to, in the context of racism or anti-racism, a lack of brown teachers. It's always one of two things, but lo and behold, here we are, redefining racism again. You know, just for the purpose of this video, you know, we're just going to redefine racism and talk about it as a structure and institution, etc. Well, considering that's not what the definition in the dictionary suggests it is, but be my guest, you redefine it for your own narrative, eh?
You might find it helpful to think about this structure as having three layers: personal, social, and institutional. Personal racism is something that we're all aware of, at least in its most obvious sense. We know that some individuals have prejudiced attitudes and behaviours. We hear about celebrity racism scandals in the media, and it would be easy to think that racism is mainly about unpleasant behaviour carried out by unpleasant people.
No, it's essentially just a play on words, because it kind of derives from tribalism, which you know, every other group of people in the world have, and group preference and whatnot, but for some strange reason we're not allowed to have it. And the little that it does still exist, blown out of proportion, over dramatised and redefined in order to justify the never-ending push to eradicate the concept of in-group preference, etc. That's kind of my little hot take on it, but nonetheless, that's here nor there. It'll be interesting to hear what they have to say in regards to institutional. I think I can guess, but...
actions that obviously stem from racism are only the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, is that right?
Nobody's born with racist attitudes and behaviours. These develop because the threads of racism are woven throughout our society.
Oh, of course.
Racism is a social structure.
Oh, it's a social structure. What a fucking hot take. This is a joke. People like us, the way we do things, power and influence. Oh, power and influence. Oh, this is feminism redefined. Yeah, again, you know, this is like part 2 to the video I made earlier on today. The power imbalances are returning again. It's just the same thing. So in order to eradicate the racism that they proclaim exists across society, we need to, you know, equalise the power. Redistribute some of that cushy power. Yeah, okay.
What does that mean for us in Scotland? Racism occurs when the dominant ethnic group in a nation or region sees itself as superior, more important, or simply more normal than other.
But they have to be the dominant ethnic group, you see. Again, you're playing with words there a bit, you know. But okay, whatever.
Ethnic groups. For the dominant group, people like us and the way we do things are given a degree of privilege and value. This means that
we're not, but we should be, hypothetically speaking, of course, because it is our country after all.
Power and influence in society remains with that dominant group. Prejudice exists in all communities, but this issue of power and influence means there's no such thing as reverse racism. Minority or non-dominant group...
I can't listen to this. You know, the worst thing about this, I mean, I'm making a bit of a joke out of it, but the reality of the matter is, this is sort of educational, quote-unquote, resources that are designed for academia. Reverse racism doesn't exist. That's the sort of BS hot takes, quote-unquote hot takes, that you would expect to hear from some little fanny with a blue bald bowl cut and specky glasses, etc. From some sort of SJW wrecked compilation in 2016 post-Trump. You know? Not in 2021 or whatever, whenever this video was actually recorded. You know? Some fucking overweight feministic teacher in Scotland sitting there trying to educate us in order to bootlick and see the world through the anti-racist lens, where racism is seen as a structure and not a fucking measly word that's in the dictionary, you know? And above all else, kids, if you take away anything from what's being discussed here tonight, is that reverse racism doesn't exist. Yeah, of course it doesn't. Yeah, it's fucking wild. So when Chris Donald was murdered brutally in Glasgow, first racially motivated murder in Scotland, that can't have been anything to do with racism at all. No, nothing at all, because reverse racism doesn't exist. Yeah, you're right, to a certain degree. Reverse racism doesn't exist because it's a bogus concept. Racism is racism, if you want to go down that route. Yeah? It's fine.
Groups in society lack the power to oppress others on a large scale.
Oh, they lack the power to oppress us. It was the oppression shite against that, you know. Does that mean that the minorities in Scotland are oppressed? I mean, this shit. This absolute nonsense. I mean, you hear it time and time again being referred to at the anti-racism demo that took place on Saturday as well. They're all going on about oppression, etc. I mean, this is all just socialistic Marxist talking points, sort of shaped to fit a Scottish context. It's just laughable. Oppression. What fucking oppression in Scotland are these people talking about exactly? Oh, lack of power, lack of leadership rules, etc, etc. If there's anybody that's actually oppressed in this country, I would make the argument that it's genuine nationalists, people in Scotland that wish to see Scotland remain Scottish. Because if we even attempt to run for political office, make a proper go of things, I would say. If we even attempt to speak out on a large scale, etc, etc, we run the fucking risk of getting everything in our life taken away from us, our life destroyed, etc. We're not allowed to speak out. We just have to accept our fate, accept this fucking nonsense. I would say that's more akin to oppression than a babe not seeing himself in a fucking leadership role in a school. But what do I know? I'm apparently just a bigot with privilege and oppressive tendencies, eh?
Individual acts of anti-white behaviour can't change this in any meaningful way.
Of course.
Later in this video, we'll look further into this idea of racism as a social structure and how it affects us all. In the meantime though, let's talk about institutional racism. In any type of organisation, institutional racism is created when rules, customs, processes and practices have been planned without considering the potential impacts on people from minority ethnic groups. Scotland or the Free Church? Minority ethnic people seem to be in the out-group. That's one thing you can change by making sure that there's no doubt they belong. You can make sure they are valued, included on an equal basis and have a meaningful influence in your school.
She only got that job because she's white.
He's got a chip on his shoulder about race because he's white.
She might not understand because of her white cultural background.
Is that supposed to be that's how they feel on a daily basis, because that's how we talk about them. It's not them that are essentially being treated like lab rats at this point. It's us as Scots, us as whites in general. So if I'm correct in saying that we're supposed to imagine that that's how the BAMEs feel on a daily basis, where he might not understand because he's from Kenya, etc, etc, with their little mockery analogies there, or whatever you will. But yeah, Matt, they're very close to the truth of what's actually occurring here. We don't understand, so we need to be re-educated, We need to be introduced to concept. And it's funny, we're supposed to benefit from this so-called system of privilege, etc, etc, because it's our ancestors built it in order for us to benefit forevermore, etc. But we all need to be educated in how it operates. But yet we all benefit from it. It's our system. But the BAMEs, they seem to know so much about it. It's very strange, that, is it not? Especially the newcomers, the people that have come here from elsewhere. Your ass Sarkars, etc. They come from fucking Bengali, or Bengal, I should say. And they seem to know more about the system and the structures that our ancestors built in order for us to benefit forever. But it's very, very strange how this all seems to be operating here. Oh, wow. But again, I'm taking the piss out of it to a certain extent, but this fucking nonsense has been introduced and created with the purpose of being introduced into Glaswegian schools. Wow, fucking wow. Unbelievable.
Talking about in-groups and out-groups might sound a bit too academic or technical. So when we're thinking about race equality, one of the easiest ways to consider this in practice is to think about the concept of culture. The idea of being part of a common ethnic or national culture is something we're all familiar with. Whether we're particularly invested in our culture or not, we all have an idea of what it is. Culture can be used to bring people together in a shared sense of who we are as a people, and that's often a thing that brings pride and belonging. But it can also be used to exclude, if too much emphasis is placed on who's seen to be like us and who is not. In a teacher training exercise developed by Gurun Pettersdottir, who's an Icelandic expert in intercultural education, groups of participants are asked to define the key features of their own culture. They then have to remove all of the features that they think some members of their cultural group might not think are important or might disagree on. As a member of the Scottish cultural group, is haggis important to me? Are bagpipes, tartan, shortbread? If I think the Christian religion is part of Scottish culture, do I think that's the Church of Scotland, or the Free Church, or the Presbyterian Church? No matter the cultural background of the participants, sometimes nothing's left at the end of this discussion. But if anything is left, it will be the same kind of fundamental human things. Family, home, and things like that.
Great, but,
the message of this is that we don't
here and all that shit.
Stereotypes from being considered different on racial grounds. It brings these freedoms for people considered white and their families, potentially over generations. Of course, not everyone has the same level of access to white privilege. For new migrants who are white, the impact of xenophobia and prejudice can limit that access to a certain extent. The majority ethnic group determines the level of white privilege, belonging and value placed on other...
Group. You mean the Scots, the indigenous Scots, the native Scots in their own country. And again, it's total fucking shit. We might be the majority, but that's about as far as it goes. Parliament's rife with native Scots, and I just see them as a bunch of treacherous bastards, if I'm honest. There's another one here, and I'll skim through this, and I need to move on. But what's this one, Oh, there's so much here. This is a great...
Thanks, Jane, and thanks everybody for coming along. As Jane said, I'm Carol Young. I'm the Deputy Director at the Coalition for Racial Equality and Rights, CRER. And thanks everybody...
CRER, bear in mind, they're the charity/organisation that I'm pretty sure played a role in the anti-racist resources, the SCP, rubber stamped the education resources, but they're also the one of the main anti-racist groups in Scotland who proclaim or base their entire existence on the concept that race doesn't exist. Now, whether or not it does exist or not, that's to be honest, that's here nor there at this point, because if you go down the route that race doesn't exist, then all you're really doing is making people ethnically aware. So it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned, but that's here nor there. They seem to insist that race doesn't exist, therefore whiteness is an evil sin. You know the script.
Who came along to the spotlight on anti-racist approaches to curriculum development last week. If you didn't make it, don't worry. I will recap one or two important points that link into the different topic we're looking at today, which is anti-racism and cohesion in the classroom. There won't be too much crossover. So I can get a feeling for how many people have managed to come to both spotlights. Can I get a virtual hands up if you make...
That's fucking done, dude.
...is maybe a step down from where we are, potentially. That's where we see a lot of prejudice operating at social level. Where...
Let's have a see how Uganda
are really important, including, active listening, communicating, discussing.
Time to move on. I think really now the only thing that could be done, hypothetically speaking, of course, is to determine how fast they're able to do what they're doing. But there's Gemma Waters here. Oh, Jesus Christ. Education Scotland website, and it says here, oh God, she's talking about racism again. The cry of many a disgruntled friend and colleague, no doubt, as they suffer my preoccupation. A likely eye roll for many a student as well. Well, I wonder why. The need for racial literacy in education and beyond is exponential. I sat in the barony on my first day of teacher training and glanced around. As ever, I was one of the few brown faces I could see, a tiny minority in a huge cohort of future teachers. I felt different from the outset, and that's not our fucking problem. That if you, as a BAME woman, a non-white, a non-Scot, feel in any shape or form different in our country, I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck if you were born here, I don't give a fuck how much you profess to be just as Scottish as us. If you feel different because you're surrounded by actual Scottish people, that's not our fucking problem. So fucking sick it, my ideas were different and the way I was perceived was different. Well, that's fine, because the way that you were quite clearly perceiving everybody around you, the way that you were feeling about yourself, you were seeing yourself was different and seeing everybody else around you was different. So don't fucking have a go at them or even imply there's something wrong with the idea of them seeing you as remotely different. Not a lot has changed on placement or on probation, or has it really changed since? There are so few teachers of calibre in Scottish education. Oh, how fucking shameful is that? It's Scotland's greatest shame. Wow. I'm just sick of these arseholes all fucking singing from the same hymn sheet. They are so desperate to infest our, not just our education system in and of itself, the resources, etc., but they also want to ensure that our teaching workforce is more BAME than it currently is. And they all seem to have the same points of contention about the fact that it's not BAME enough at present. So fucking what? Give me one good, valid reason that doesn't reek of shite. They can't. They all amount to the same nonsense. Oh, they don't see themselves. That has to reflect society. It's our fucking country. Fucking hell, man. No wonder your friends you were on about at the beginning, eye roll and tut when you start your shit. Yeah. I arrived at Smithcroft with a singular aim of starting an anti-racist club. Oh, well, you sound like a barrel of laughs, don't you, Gemma? Not an equalities club, not an inclusion club or a minority alliance, but an anti-racist club that gave a voice to young people at my school who felt isolated in the way I had. Oh my God. So I mean, first and foremost, I'm not going to tar every BAME with the same brush and assume that they view the world the same way that these anti-racist, cancerous parasites see the world. They are the fucking problem, make no mistake about it. The irony of these people is they profess to the hilltops that they want to see a world where there's peace, prosperity and progression. inclusion and all the rest of it, and there will be no racism, you know, etc, etc, etc. But all they do is talk about fucking racism, you know, and race, all this shit. They're making people unironically racially conscious in their attempts to prove that race doesn't exist. You know, that's what a lot is predicated on, the claim that race doesn't exist. Well, shut the fuck up about it then. But they can't. They cannot. Because they're building careers off the back of it, while simultaneously using it as an opportunity to achieve power. Grab power. Steal power. Nonetheless, so, but I'm really pissed off with this fucking thing. Again, my plan for this video is kind of going to be a bit wonky woo here in terms of trajectory. I was going to cover some of the arseholes that were at the anti-racist thing, but no, I'm reviewing what Gemma Walters has to say, because she's talking nonsense. So, you know, my point there was that I'm not going to tar every BAME with the same brush. But naturally, this BAME individual is essentially doing just that. So, who's the racist here? Yeah, hey. But nonetheless, right? So, she had insecurities, probably an identity crisis of some sort, because she's in a majority white country, didn't see herself, and she has an issue with that. So she assumes other people feel the same way. So her grand plan, her grand solution is to start up an anti-racist club. An anti-racist club, not bear in mind, right? Not an inclusion group, right? Not in a minority alliance or an equalities club. No, an anti-racist club. And the anti-racist club's different because that's all about shitting on white people, shitting on Scotland, shitting on our structures, and insisting, that everything needs to be reconstructed. And of course, race doesn't exist. You know, everything's predicated on the idea of whiteness. Yeah. Okay. Sounds like a great, riveting club. I'm sure many BAMEs joined. We've raised the profile of young people of colour in our school. Oh, well, that's lovely. What about the whites? What about the whites? We've started to offer anti-racist learning in the PSC curriculum, and we'll be expanding this further next session. And there you have it, folks. So this is another example of them starting to infiltrate the curriculum in and of itself now, as opposed to just chatting their nonsense waffle on blog posts in irrelevant spaces online. This is the future. This is what's happening under our noses, essentially. We began to challenge ideas of colour blindness. So, of course, you see, you can't even not see race anymore. You can't even not have a problem with somebody being in your company who doesn't happen to look like you. That's an issue in and of itself now. They want to challenge that idea. And they champion differences through a variety of inputs and initiatives. We have had high-profile events like our Diverse Voices series, which championed BAMEs in writing, poetry, etc, etc. We are not a utopia. We are absolutely not done yet, but we are moving forward, and I feel strongly that if someone asked our young people about race, they'd have lots to say. We are starting conversations. Talking about race is the first step, and we were hoping to run. Oh God, you've talked about race again? Yep, and now I'm not going to stop anytime soon. Oh. Well, thank heavens for that, Gemma. You fucking intellectual powerhouse. I can't wait to read more of your bullshit. These people need much of an excuse to all take to the podium, or in this instance, their stand, to all yam it on and peddle nonsense, take things out of context, point out things that don't exist, or just blatantly lie. It's standard procedure for anti-racists. They're no different to feminists, essentially. Same methodology as it is used by both groups. You know, you just swap out sex or for race, but back and forth you go, like. But stand up to racism demo in the city centre was part of a day of international protest to mark UN Anti-Racism Day. Activists gathered in Kelvin Way in the West End before marching through the streets for a rally in George Square at 12:30. And of course, there's a few videos here. I've still got the live stream open, and I had it in my history from the stream on Sunday. Not entirely sure how much I'll play of it now, given the fact that I've kind of rambled for a while, but there are chants of no borders, no nations, no deportations, and say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here. So they're very talented individuals, these people. Definitely not something I haven't heard before 1,000 times, but I'm getting a bit irritated with this notion. It was brought up by one of the speakers at the actual event itself, the one that were doing the speeches, that one of the ways that we eradicate or, quell racism is to, remove border fences, etc. So it's all playing into the larger agenda at play here, and they're working away in the background as they dilute our nations. Is to essentially have a world, or especially where the West is concerned, where there is no borders, because there's no such thing as the nations that once occupied the grounds within said borders. But anyway.
Stop deportation! Stop
So we've got Hamza Youssef and whatnot. They all took to the stands to talk their usual redacted During the march, there were chants of no border. Yeah, we got that bit. People of all ages gathered for the rally in Glasgow and held signs which included the statements Black Lives Matter, migrants make our NHS. Well, that's kind of statistically incorrect, is it not? You know. And all refugees welcome, says fucking who. And again, if you start going down that route of, you know, bootlicking and telling the world that every single refugee is welcome here, you're going to have people who are not here for the right reasons, attempting to get into the country, and with your rhetoric, with your worldview, you're going to accept them with open arms. Yeah. Whereas I'm a lot more cautious, I'm a lot more sceptical, because we have for the longest time been seeing that very thing occurring across Europe and whatnot. Hence Africans coming over to Europe when it was supposed to be a Syrian refugee crisis. Yeah? I'm starting to see the same thing now with Ukraine, funnily enough. But so given I've wasted about 20 minutes of my existence ranting at an anti-racist blog instead of covering what I was supposed to cover, I think I would just stick to similar themes. And the woman on screen here was one of the speakers at the event that took place on Saturday, and she represents the EIS, which is the largest teaching union in Scotland. So let's hear what she has to say. It's going to be very riveting, of course. Just goes to show, though, that these people have an influence in academia, education, etc. And as I said, the anti-racist rhetoric and narrative ideology itself is slowly seeping into every fibre of our academic being.
Today I stand here to represent the teachers of Scotland, teachers and lecturers who are the members of the EIS. Today we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters across the world against racism and supporting the right of asylum. As a wealthy nation, we have a duty to do all we can to ensure that we open our doors, our schools, our communities to those in need of safety. The EIS welcomes migrant and refugee families into Scottish schools. We strongly reject anti-immigration rhetoric, and we support teachers to challenge the harmful myths that are related to immigration. We have recently reprinted and distributed.
First and foremost, she goes on about what was it she said? Anti-migration rhetoric. Define anti-migration rhetoric. Is there any rhetoric whatsoever that is against the concept of unlimited flows of immigration, or just in general against the immigration policies that are being proposed, or just immigration? They don't want to see it. Is that classified as, well, of course, it would be classified as anti-immigration rhetoric. Therefore, that's something that these people will combat in the schooling systems. Yeah, so you're not allowed to have a difference of opinion. Secondly, another thing that she mentions there was the obligation, or worse to that effect. She alluded to it. What's she referring to, of course? Well, it's this international world stage. We all have to play our part. We're all obligated. Why? Because of UN conventions. Yeah. So, there's that, of course. If I was in a charge of a hypothetical country, I would tell the United Nations to go fuck themselves, quite frankly, but purely for the fact that it just seems that it's the biggest cop-out going, you know? And we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do more, and we will always have to do more, because we're obligated to do so. So we don't have a say at all, essentially. And then thirdly there, she goes on about the myths of immigration. Well, that's funny, I made a video on that very thing that they're talking about there, and it was full of BS, of course. Pretty sure you can still find that on my channel somewhere if you wish to. You know, we're not very clever when it comes to their myth debunking, let's just say that. But
our Welcome to Scotland immigration packs for refugee families, and are currently looking into have our packs translated into Ukrainian. But to be clear, we support the inclusion of all migrants and refugees, regardless of the colour of their skin. We celebrate diversity in our schools, but we know that black and minority ethnic colleagues, we know that black and minority ethnic colleagues bring invaluable wealth and knowledge and expertise to our schools, colleges and universities. But we know that the numbers of BME teachers is woefully low. And that number, even that terrible number, is not reflected adequately in senior management positions, and this is something we are currently investigating. The racist barriers faced by our colleagues must be challenged.
Oh, the racist part. She just said there that they're investigating it, therefore there can't be a conclusion already. There can't be a consensus if there's an investigation in progress, right? So there's that. But naturally, the obvious conclusion, without even needing to waste any time or effort or funding into investigation, the natural conclusion that's always the fucking same with these people is a disparity indicates racism. That is where we're at in 2022. That is where we're fucking at. Gone are the days where racism was defined as the textbook, old-fashioned dictionary definition. Oh, no, it's disparities, microaggressions, and the lack of leadership positions. How do we stop that? How do we promote anti-racism? Well, let's just make our parliament full of people from fucking Kenya and Pakistan in order to achieve that sweet, sweet anti-racist sentiment. Fucking do one. Honestly, I mean, I'm not even making a professional video at this point. I just get fucking raging. Absolute fucking raging. Every single one of these dickheads, unironically, not only are they totally cucking to the concept of anti-racism and global citizenship, you know, essentially selling out their own nation, their own land, etc., their own people, their own history, their own heritage, their own right, their own claim to their own land. Let's just put that to one side for a second. They all unironically parrot the same bullshit. Yeah, none of them can conjure up an organic point to save themselves. It's always the same. Oh, there's not enough paying teachers. Yeah, have you heard that one? I have. I fucking have as it goes, you know. What's the next joke you've got for me? Is that your big hot take to prove that racism is right from Scotland? Fuck, like. And the reality of the matter is, if there was issues, if there was barriers, then there wouldn't be any paying teachers at all. Fucking Jesus. Oh, honest to God, like.
At our EIS Council last Friday, we passed a motion to call for solidarity with the teachers, students and the people of Ukraine. We express solidarity with Ukrainian teacher trade unions and we call on international bodies to seek a peaceful settlement. But we also call on the British government to allow entry and provide support for refugees without restriction, documentation and visas.
Again, flappy words, flappy rhetoric, sounds fantastic, but the reality of the matter is that concept, that idea in and of itself just screams out exploitation. Of course it does, but hey, what do I know?
We have also urged the Scottish and UK governments to act to protect those most at risk in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, right now, girls are being denied an education. This is unjustifiable and morally repugnant. The EIS supports the work done by Education International to fight for the right of all young people to a safe education, and we support the Gender Equality Action Plan. Quality education is crucial for ensuring women have a competitive advantage in the global economy. Even in our own schools, we know that BAME girls and women can be at a worse disadvantage than their male counterparts.
Of course.
And we have a greater responsibility
That's why white boys on average are failing across most aspects of the education system in the UK. No, but we know why. How do we know this? Oh, the intersectional bullshit, of course. That's because this is all they ever parrot, you know. It'd be really good, and you know, maybe I would take these individuals a bit more seriously if they could actually take to their podiums or whatever it is they decide to go and spew out their venom, and they actually said stuff that could be taken into consideration, could be viewed as plausible, could be viewed as somewhat intellectual, reasonable even, but nah, of course not. Nah, why would they do that? They just open up Nicola Thinlip's book of progressive talking points and away they fucking go. Honestly, fuck, like.
to show our sisters, to show support to our sisters and ensure they have equality in society and equality in the workplace. As teachers, we are fully convinced that promoting peace, inclusion and diversity in our classrooms is the key to creating a society where racism and oppression is a thing of the past. Thank you.
Really great. So it's good to know, just for anybody that's got children in school in Scotland, you know, the EIS, one of the top dogs there, if you will, actively saying that they're promoting, you know, diversity, etc. in the classroom, normalising the concept as your child becomes an ever-growing, increasing minority in the country that he's got birthright and claim to. But you know, that's here nor there. Yeah, and the reason behind it, it's to ensure that there's no more oppression in Scotland. There isn't any oppression to begin with, so that's a null and void justification. But yeah, don't let that stop you. Who else have we got? It's education related. We should probably get Kajida on. Big bad Kajida Mohammed. Oh no! Before I do that,
to announce that next Friday there's going to be a global climate.
You do that. There's no way in hell that I could not pass up listening to this little shit with the worst hairstyle I've ever seen. Admittedly worse than Nicola Sturgis's, and that is saying something, considering the one she's rocking now is absolutely abhorrent. But this woman is about to come on stage. I have never in my life seen such a fucking shocking haircut. You think the piss she's about to come away with bad enough? Wait till you see how she presents herself. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Unions in the workplace and in our wider community to challenge racism is absolutely critical. So our next speaker is going to be from my own union. This time I've got it right. She is UCU Scotland President, and she also teaches at the same institution as me. Please welcome Lena Vanagren.
Hello everyone. All refugees are welcome here. I am so happy to be...
That's a lovely thing to say. Well, you stand in my country and announce that to the world. Yeah. These platitudes, this namby-pamby wishy-washy rhetoric, sorry. But again, take a step back, look through the bullshit that's been espoused by these individuals. When they say that shit, they are announcing that to the world on your behalf, essentially, but it's our country. They're speaking as if our country is just essentially an open, borderless sanctuary for all of the world. I can do one.
Here today representing UCU Scotland, my union, and I am so excited to see so many people here today. Now, UCU, the University College Union in Scotland, we represent 9,000 university workers, lecturers, tutors, librarians, administrators. And we stand here in solidarity with all the anti-racists and with all refugees, and we welcome you here. So, we know racism remains prevalent in workplaces. We know...
How do we know? Oh, well, of course, it's Hispanics. Oh, why did I even bother to waste my energy asking that rhetorical question? We know. Do you fuck?
That racism remains prevalent in education institutions.
Oh, we know it remains prevalent in education. Well, that's funny, because every single time I've ever heard any individual try to prove that it exists in the educational setting, whether that be high school settings, colleges, etc., they always seem to point to the system itself. How very convenient. So it's an invisible figment of their imagination, or it's an invisible presence, an ominous presence that's all around us, but only they can see it. I mean, fuck off. I mean, let's face it here. There is not one law that's in the books in Scotland that actively discriminates against BAMEs for being BAME. There's not one law in the books that would showcase or suggest that whites have an advantage over these people whatsoever. It was, in theory, a meritocracy until these people started pointing to disparities in order to render said meritocracy redundant, as policies put in place to prioritise these people above our own in order to achieve equality. Fucking bite your tongue, pal.
We know it remains prevalent in our governments.
Oh, we know. Oh, is that right? Aye. Is that right? Well, they're referring to the racist Tories, aren't they? The big bad fascist Tories, aye. Yeah, okay.
My union just now, UCU, is taking strike action across 11 different Scottish universities for 5 days, from 5 days on from next week. One of the issues we are taking strike action over is racism in higher education. There is currently a 17% pay gap for black workers. That is not acceptable. You are literally being paid less and employed on horrible contracts because of the colour of your skin.
And you're literally not just standing there unironically with the worst hairstyle I've ever fucking seen, but you're also a lying little shit on top of that. You know, the idea that people are being paid less because they're black is an absolute preposterous lie. Again, the way that these people operate baffles me, because they're never ever seem to be in a position where they get challenged on their fucking nonsense. You know, pay gaps. Now, this is the same concept as the gender pay gap, but they've just copy and pasted it in a racial aspect now. So naturally, if there's less BAMEs in an institution who work for an agency, and you add up all the wages of these BAMEs in comparison to all the whites that are working with agencies, stands to reason it's going to look like the whites are getting paid a little bit more. It's not the case, of course. You know, agencies overall pay shit money. Speaking, if they're anything like the construction agencies. But I can guarantee you that they do not pay people different wages based on their race. That's absolutely not, especially in a university capacity. He's like, I don't even need to look into that. No, that's nonsense. It's just nonsense. Oh, of course, she knows best. Because, of course. What?
Universities in the UK are institutionally, structurally racist.
Oh, they're institutionally, structurally racist, said the big brain with that cracking hairdo, yeah? Well, I mean, that's all they can ever say. It's institutions, it's oppression, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that, but they can never point to anything actual concrete to prove that what they're talking about. And, you know, and that's why they cling to the odd racist incident that may occur throughout UK's history, such as, you know, the aforementioned Stephen Lawrence, etc. Always cling to these events because that's all they've got to go with, essentially.
But we want to change that.
Of course you fucking do. Well, I don't really want people like you in my country anymore if it's all the same. Or at the very bare minimum, I don't think that any of you people should have any influence in the way that our politics or education is structured. But it seems that you people are having more and more of an influence, and that, quite frankly, is a detriment to our own people. Now, where is Kajida?
University lecturer. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Khadija, and I am the co-chair of the STUC Black Workers Committee. I am co-chair with Diljit and Sarah, who I hope Sarah's somewhere in the audience, but I know Diljit couldn't be here. But we fundamentally, as a Black Workers Committee, have been challenging racism in workplaces over the last few.
Of course you have, because this is Kajida Mohammed's MO. Since I have known who this woman is, that's all she's ever talked about. But it's hard to hear her, admittedly, but I'm pretty sure she says something. She works with some organisation that's got black in the title. Last time I checked, she wasn't black, but what's right now at this point?
Few years, previous chairs like my colleague Leila Roxanne and Usman Ali focused on the recruitment, the retention and the promotion of people of colour in the workplace through our Break the Race Ceiling campaign.
Oh, of course. So again, they're cracking brainstorming idea to apparently eradicate racism that they claim existed in workplaces, aka again disparities or glass ceilings, etc., was to prioritise BAMEs in the hiring practice. So again, discrimination. So the meritocracy no longer exists the minute they start that shit. But again, they get to sugarcoat their malevolence, their prioritisation of their own, by proclaiming that they're only doing so to eradicate racial injustice. Racial injustice, of course, that doesn't fucking exist. They'll claim, of course, from the contrary, that it does. Their proof? Disparities. Imagine my shock. Imagine my shock.
As Anwar have already stated, it's a time of heightened focus on racism and a recognition of the need to tackle deep-rooted and long-standing issues of inequality.
Again, inequality, yeah. So this is kind of like harkening back to the video that I made earlier on regarding the feminists and their redefining of words. The same thing is true with these people. So inequality in this context. It's not like blacks are being held back in society, you know. It's not like things are put in place to deliberately hamper blacks' prospects of getting decent jobs and whatnot. No. This is simply disparities. There's not enough black CEOs. Did you know there's not enough black head teachers across Scotland? That's racial inequality. You know, I think if you're going to start redefining words, modernising the definitions of words, but still sticking to the old word itself, I think you should scrap that idea. But I know you're not going to, because that's all part and parcel with the manipulative bullshit that you got going for yourselves. But I really think that they should probably at least consider the concept of creating new fucking words. But no, can't you do that, of course.
The global response to the murder of George Floyd intensified that depth and strength faced by black workers. But we must always remember there is always many other George Floyds that we don't get to hear about.
Oh, I know, and some of them happen to be white, and you especially won't hear about those individuals. Now, of course you won't. But you're oppressed, apparently.
But we also must be mindful that many of our black colleagues suffer in their workplaces in silence.
Oh yeah, and define suffering. Jesus Christ. And again, that's anecdotal at best, but when you start going down the train of thought that this happens to so many more people, but they just don't speak out. I mean, fuck, you could literally be making that up for all we know.
And we need to speak up. I fear that complacency sets in, the baton being dropped.
Yeah, well, what they mean is that all the rhetoric, all the agreement that all the people that have been in some form of solidarity with these people as they immediately jump on the back of the George Floyd gravy train. All of these people were guilty of doing that. They wanted to ensure, and they still wish to ensure, that all of that momentum that they managed to generate here on the back of George Floyd doesn't dissipate until change is enshrined in law, if they had their way. But at the very bare minimum, change is, is seen.
Opportunities not being seized. We must aim for sustained conversations that lead to real change.
You mean us sitting down and listening to your worldview and accepting all the things that you proclaim exist, and thus implementing changes in order to accommodate you? Go fuck yourself, Kajida. Yeah.
We always hear about that, don't we? We need to have a diverse workforce. What does that mean?
Oh, I don't know, Kajida. What does it mean? What does it mean, Kajida?
Because what our colleagues are telling us is that they are still feeling isolated, they're feeling ignored, they feel that they're not being valued, and they are being disrespected at every turn.
Is that right? Now, let me just say this. I reckon that the people she's referring to, if they exist, will be anti-racist BAMEs. The average BAME probably doesn't see the world that way. Quite frankly, if they do, they're the problem. Most people, irrespective of their race, don't go to work every day because they expect to feel fucking valued and whatnot. They go earn money and they come home at the end of the day. That's as simple as that. There's a serious, reeking issue of self-entitlement that exudes out of every orifice of individuals such as this overweight arsehole. I just can't anymore. I'm wasting too much time, your time, if you've even made it to this far. Then fair play to you. But where is this? Just before I go, oh, please tell me I never cut it off, because this summarised. Oh, there it is here. Yeah, it's Kajida Mohammed in 2019. You make up oh, fuck you, wait a minute. Nicola Sturgeon and her getting an award. Of course, you couldn't make up. Yeah, so pretty much summarises the shit show that is anti-racism, eh?